Hello and welcome back to the building or rebuilding of this Fokker DR1, which is in fact a Flare Baronet which has been scaled up to 1/4 scale. As I said last time, it's my intention in building this to try and improve its scale appearance without going totally over the top and going for a full scale build, which is basically in keeping with the Flare principle, I think. One feature I want to add is the wing skids, and I've thought long and hard about this and it's sort of held me up a little bit. I have actually found through searching the internet a couple of people who've attempted to do this. One chap who did a very beautiful scale model of a Fokker DR1. He actually incorporated blocks where the mechanism was screwed on or bolted on, and by his own admission at the end of the build series he said that he'd had to repair it on at least 2 occasions where the blocks had ripped out and eventually even the bolts had sheared. And then sort of Cliff Harvey came to my rescue. I said that I was concerned about this and I had thought about using piano wire and a skid and then disguising the wood around it. Somebody pointed out that he'd put skids on his Dancing Wings build, and when I had a look at it, sure enough he had, and he fabricated them out of brass. And then the penny began to drop for me, at least, when I thought the reason that's going to work is that if it does have a hard hit, the brass will bend and give and can always be straightened and pulled back straight. In fact, Cliff said that he hadn't had any major problems with it, and he thought that if it had hit that hard, the skids would have been the least of his worries. And then I found this photograph. So let's zoom in a little and I'll tell you something about it. Let's see if I can get it to focus. Excuse me. There you go. I've actually drawn around in pencil the outside so you can see it a little bit more clearly. This is a photograph of a reproduction full-scale DR1. And when I was looking at it, I began to make sense of how it works. So what you have here, I'll actually draw on it. What you have here is, it doesn't work, does it? A barrel with a split in the middle and a bolt going through. You have a retaining bracket. Obviously this is the skid, and then at the end of the skid it's been turned or to make it round rather than square in section. It has a steel ring around it and a tang, and that goes through a slot in a bracket in the forward position. This pivots, and I think what happens is they push through the skid, and the fact that this pivots makes it easier to manoeuvre. Push it through the tang, through the slot, and although they haven't done it here, it's my belief that what would then happen is that would be bent over, and that would hold the skid in place to protect the wing. Now I'm basically producing the same idea. I don't think it'll need a swivel point here, but I'm going to produce a very similar design, and it's got me thinking to how I can actually hold it into the wings. So we'll go a little bit closer on a sketch that I'm going to draw out for you, and hopefully that'll make it clear. Hopefully a little sketch will make it a little bit easier to understand what I'm going to try and do. Let's take the front bracket first that takes the tang on this skid. So that's going to be a very simple affair. I'm going to actually use this brass. I've deliberately gone not too heavy because I think Cliff Harvey has got the right idea that you want it to actually give a little. I have some heavier grade stuff, but I think that would rip the wing out if anything went wrong. So I'm basically going to cut a piece at the length of that. And let's just say I'm going to go with the hole that would take the piano wire on the end of the skid. That will sit in a block that will be glued to the end rib, which has major reinforcement on it. Now let's look at this block itself. This is how I'm going to cut it. I'll try and attempt to do it as a 3D sketch. It may fail disastrously, but let's see. So I'm going to drill a hole through here. And the reason for that is to relieve the stress on the wood, because what I'm going to do next is with a razor saw cut a slot like this. It would actually probably be half the size up of this distance here on the block. And then that'll have some flex in it, a bit like a clothes peg, I suppose, with the strength of the grain. And I'll push fit in this brass. Now I may not even glue it. I think it would probably be strong enough as it is, and then in the event of a heavy hit, it's going to pull out and probably do less damage to the wing. Might rip a little bit of covering as it pulls out, but it's not going to rip the ribs apart. So that bracket's very easy to do. It's basically a length of this cut with a hole drilled in it, and then this block will be cut with a hole drilled through and a slot sewn in. The rear one, I've had a little bit think about this, and I think it can be done much more simply than the way obviously the full-size prototype is for a model. Take a piece of that brass, the block will be the same principle, and I'll silver solder a piece of tubing on the end. When the silver solder is obviously set, which is all but instantly, I'll cut a slice out here, and then what I've basically got is I've got a duplication of what you see in the full-size prototype. A bolt would go through here, and the bracket in cross-section that holds the skid, this would be fabricated. It's just a bit of fettling in brass, which is quite a pleasant thing to do actually. That joint there would be silver soldered, a hole drilled through, and the whole lot would be bolted on there. So I think that's doable. And the big advantage is, once I've made these blocks, and we'll do that now, and they're glued in place, I don't need to worry about fabricating this or even making this until much later on. I know how it's going to be held in the wing, and that means I can push ahead and cover it, because it is my intention to actually get the wings covered before I start this wing covered before I start anything else. I'm not going to do the whole model and then cover it in one go. I'm going to break it up a little bit. So let's get cracking. I'll get this wood cut, and I'll show you me thinking regarding the relieving the stress, and we'll see if this brass will push in and will be held and retained effectively. Let's have a go. So there's a block made. I've drilled the hole through, and I've put a slot in using a razor saw, and let's try the brass. It mightn't actually end up this width, but let's see if it'll slide in. And there you go, and that's being held really quite firmly. The only concern is that the brass could come out that way, but I could go on forever like this. I think I'm going to suck it and see. That's what I'm going to go with. I'll make 4 of these blocks, and we'll get them glued in position ready for the covering. Well, I'm calling this job done now. The blocks are in. You can see them here, I hope. The forward tongue and the rear tongue are free to move, and that will allow the brass to be pushed in, and the relief hole that I've drilled in partway down will prevent it from splitting. This end cap that I've added was a sort of thought. I think they will be glued in, and I wanted somewhere for the glue to stop. So the brass pieces will be pushed in there with epoxy applied, surfaces roughed up, pushed in, and then that will also bind this rear flap and the front flap on these blocks. So now that that's done, I can move ahead and get this prepped, and the next video will be on the covering process. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found my sort of head scratching useful. Thanks to Cliff Harvey in particular for showing me how he did it, and it sort of set me on the right track, and thanks for that. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Bye for now, and thanks again.